What's up, everyone? Welcome to Cracka. Comics, reviews, also movies, comedy, anything else I think kicks ass. It's a very special episode today. Um, I was watching a couple of videos with my friends and stuff like that. We were going through YouTube, and we were watching Poet Skinny, one of his videos where he was saying why he likes comics and how he got into them, stuff like that. And my friends we're saying, you should do a video about that, how you got into comics and stuff like that. That'd be pretty cool. We'd love to hear, that lovely story. Um, so, taking a break from showing you my comic book collection to actually give you a little insight on how I began collecting comics and why I like them, why I collect them, stuff like that. So sit back and enjoy. Might be somewhat of a long tale, but maybe you'll like it. Um, anyway, me when I was a kid, uh, didn't really collect comics. I knew who Spider-Man was. I knew who the Hulk was. I knew who Superman was, but I didn't know really anybody else. And the only real reason I knew who they were is from movies or from the cartoons. Spider-Man: The Amazing Friends was on when I was a kid, and used to watch that every morning. And the Incredible Hulk TV show with Lou Ferrigno I used to watch all the time, so I knew who he was. Superman movies were out, so I've seen them. Didn't really know who Batman was because I really didn't know Batman until the Keaton movie. So I knew Adam West. I saw a couple of things like that, so I kind of knew what Batman was, but I never really knew who he was until later on. Anyway, when I was a kid, my father. I'll show you a little picture of him. This is not when I was a kid, but this is actually when I was 17. But there's my dad and I. Get a little closer in there. My father worked construction all the time, so he had weird hours. He'd be gone in the morning, wouldn't come back till late at night. And my mom, she always had different jobs. A lot of it usually working at home. She had things that she would do, which were pretty cool because I always had somebody home. I was an only child. Well, I still am an only child, duh. But so I didn't really have anybody else there. So I was always play with toys or stuff like that. Watch cartoons. Keep my mind on the TV. But anyway, never really got into comics. I did like to read when I was a kid, but it was mostly like it was like a Mickey Mouse pop-up book, stuff like that. But I really didn't get into comics until I was around, I'm gonna say 8 years old. 1988 is when I started reading stuff because my cousin Eddie, who I always call the comic guru because he's got more comics than anyone that I know, and he's got more comics than some bookstores, comic book stores have. So it's amazing. I remember when I went to his house, there's just boxes and boxes and boxes of comics. It was just insane. But even then, I still wasn't into comics. I kind of told the story a little bit before, but it's gonna get more detailed for you. Um, one one day I was hanging out with my cousins because they were getting ready to move to California, and my cousin went to a comic book store, and he's like, because of course he was always into it since way back, and I always thought it was stupid, but because I never really gave it a chance. But he went to a comic store, picked up some stuff, and I've said it before, and he had an Avengers West Coast, and I looked at the picture, and I was just like, wow, man, what are these guys? And he explained it to me, and I'm looking at him, and I was just amazed. I'm like, oh my god, that's really cool that they can do these things. And he was really nice, and he gave me the comic, and he said, here you go. And it's pretty much what started off. I read that thing like 1,000 times till it almost fell apart. Actually, it did fall apart from me reading it all the time. And a week later, again, still before my cousins left for California, my aunt was taking my cousin to a comic book store, and she's like, do you want to come along? And normally I would say, no, I'm not going to that. But this time I was, yeah, I'll go. Yeah, take a look. And it's the first time I was ever in a comic book store. And I can't remember the name of it was, but it doesn't exist anymore. But it was just awesome. It was huge. Everything was well lit. And the smell, like any comic book person knows the smell of a comic book store. It's awesome. And I was just like, oh man. And I just saw this wall with all these new things at the time, 1988. Well, 87, 88, give or take. And I was just like amazed. I was like, oh man, that's awesome. And my aunt said, you pick whatever you want. I'll get you one. And it's funny because I actually picked oh man, the Human Fly #1. And she's like, that's what you want? I said, yeah. My cousin was kind of laughing at me because I don't know if he bought it or he didn't have it or whatever. But and I brought that home and I loved it, and I read it like a billion times, so it got, almost destroyed from me just going back and forth, back and forth. But that was the second comic I ever got. But moving on. Uh, that's kind of how it got started. And people ask, why do you collect them, and why are you so, passionate, I guess, about it. But basically, when I was a kid, and even though my father did construction, and I made a lot of money. My father was a gambler, still is a gambler, so it kind of does a little damage when you're that hardcore into gambling. And with my family, you never knew where you were going to live. You didn't have an idea. I mean, you could be in one spot for a year and a half, the next time, and then all of a sudden, he loses at the tables or whatever it is, and then he doesn't have enough money to pay the rent, and we got to move. And then you move somewhere else, and you're only there for 2 months, and you can't afford the rent, and then you wind up moving somewhere else. So basically, when I was a kid, I moved around a lot. Every couple months I would move, and then sometimes if I was lucky I was at a place for a year. And I mean, it was, like I said, it wasn't a bad childhood. My parents were cool and everything, other than my father being a gambler and moving around. And I had really no trouble ever making friends because I was, so likable. But these things were always there. They were always around. So that's pretty much why I still collect comics and why I love collecting, because whenever I moved somewhere, a new place, and I didn't meet anybody, or had anybody to talk to late at night, or, Saturday mornings, and I had no friends at that time or whatever, I could always pick one of these up and read it, and, they never judged you, they never, cause you any harm or anything unless you get nailed in the eye, but, or paper cut. But these were always around. Every time I had a problem, if I was at school and somebody was giving me, problems, and I felt bad, I would go and I would read a comic, and, I'm like, oh, that's cool, and then you just kind of escape, like you're out of your own mind for a while. You're kind of zoned in on this character, like, it's one of the reasons why I like Spider-Man so much, because he was just like, not that he was a normal guy, because obviously he's got superpowers, but he had like everyday problems, and I guess I kind of related to it, so I was always a Spider-Man fan. And with comics, it was funny because my parents, my mother loved it because I was reading, so I would go nuts. So she would, whatever money, if she had extra money after expenses like food and stuff like that, she would say, I'll give you $2 or $3, and we'll go to the store and you could pick one out. And that was just awesome because I would go there and I would look for the best cover, or especially Spider-Man. I would look at Spider-Man and I would be like, oh man, I wonder what he's up to now, or and then I remember in 1990 I figured out who Wolverine was for the first time, so I went crazy over Wolverine, and he was my favorite. Spider-Man was my favorite, then I moved on to Wolverine, which a lot of people did, but anyway, one of the other reasons why I love comics also is, like I said, my parents were cool with it. My mother loved it because I was reading. My father loved it because I was reading, and I would read these things, and then, amazing enough, I would do better in school. Like I would read a lot of these, and even though I wasn't obviously focused on this in school, because I was reading it the right way, and my mom would, if I couldn't get a word, my mom would be like, "Oh, that's adventure, or that's that or that," and in school it helped. I mean, if I'd look at a word and be like, "Oh man, I read that in Spider-Man," and the teacher would laugh, but she's like, "Oh, well, what's it say?" I said, "Adventure," or adventurous. And I was nailing words that people were like, "Oh, especially like, was it a third, fourth grade or whatever?" I was like, "Oh my god, how'd you get that?" Comics, they don't really whoop your mind. They help. But the other thing is, it's again, everyone's like, why do you still go crazy over this stuff? One, they're fun. I mean, they're entertainment. They definitely keep you out of your everyday problems. I mean, they're always there. But also, like I said, when I was a kid, my father, usually they say with gamblers, always have to have a reason to go gambling. Like, who knows? But when I was a kid, and I had toys. I had plenty of toys. I was never beaten or anything, so I was lucky. My family was really cool like that. But my father, whenever we moved, especially, he would always toss my toys because it would be just an extra thing to, I guess, move. So he didn't want me bothered. So my toys, every time we moved, were always thrown out, or they were always destroyed, or something, would happen, and I would always lose them. And then I'd be, I wouldn't have many toys, and like I did have a couple Thundercats that I had to hide. Like I always, whenever I knew we were moving, I would put my favorite toys in a backpack, and I would hide them, and then I would tell my father that it was my school stuff, so they didn't get destroyed. They would have to come. Uh, so, but the comics, like I said, when I was collecting comics when I was a kid, I didn't have many because I didn't have a job or anything. So, and not like my family was poor, but you had food and stuff like that is more important than comics. Um, but with comics, my father would never toss them. He would always make sure they were brought with us whenever we moved. I don't know if it's because he figured they'd be worth money eventually, which I doubt because he didn't really see it that way. I just think that he looked at it as that I was reading them, and they were helping in school, and and my father was a cool guy. He really was, just other than the gambling. But with comics, it was kind of like he wasn't into them, but he liked that I was into something so much that I was just so um, I guess engulfed in it that it was a book. I was reading the book. He didn't care what it was. I guess really, it's just that I was reading a book and I wasn't sitting in front of the TV going click 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 click. And I guess that's why they always came around. And every year I would get I would ask my parents for a couple toys, but I would also ask for, oh, can you get me this comic book? I saw it, and my parents were always really cool with that. Like I said, my father was really good with stuff. I always had clothes. Whenever I needed a pair of clothes, my first person, he'd be like, well, we'll go shopping. Even if we didn't have that much money and my pants are ripped, the first thing, let's go get you some pants. No big deal. So he was cool with that, with stuff like that. And it's just amazed, because like I said, with comics, he always made sure they went with us. I guess I lucked out because I pretty much I have every comic I ever bought or somebody ever bought for me. I have them all. Some of them might not be in the best of shape, but I have them. I've never lost them. They were never lost when we moved, and they were never destroyed. So that's one of the cool things. Another thing is, like I said, my friends are asking, like, why do you have such gaps if you're such a huge collector? Again, it all comes down to money. When I was a kid, we weren't rich. Everyone thought we were rich sometimes because my father would win at the gambling things and he would buy some expensive stuff, so everyone thought we were rich, but we were never rich. Only in name. But anyway, the reason I have gaps and stuff besides money too is, especially when I moved around, there wasn't always a comic book store around me, so a lot of times they were tough to find. Um, but anyway, another reason with gaps is, again, it's really all it comes down to money and stuff like that, and so you can't get them all. You have to. Any comic book fan should know that you can never get them all. I mean, unless you win the lottery, and then you get millions and millions of dollars, and even then you might not be able to get them all. But uh, besides money, it was moving too. Like I said, there wasn't a lot of there were a lot of comic stores, but they were learning a lot when I moved around. One cool thing is that comic book store when I was say 10. When I turned 10, I moved to Wantor, New York, and my grandmother always lived in Hicksville, and I would always visit her to take her food shopping because she couldn't see all that well. So I was always helping her, and she'd always give me like $5. To a kid, $5 back then was like, whoa, you're rich, So one day I was taking her shopping, and a comic book store actually opened up in the same shopping center as the food store. And I almost dropped. I said, "Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god!" And my grandma was like, "What's going on? What's going on?" And I was like, "It's a comic book store! Oh my god!" So it was awesome because every week I got to buy comics because I would always take my grandmother shopping every week for food. So it was really cool. I would always get $5 from my grandmother, and my mother would give me $5, so I had $10. And back then, that was a lot of money to go and get comics. And the comic book store owner and I became pretty good friends. I mean, I'm only 10 years old, and he was saying I knew more about comics than he did, and he owned the store. So it was cool for a couple of years. When I turned 13, he was saying, "Oh, do you have a job?" And I laughed. I was like, "I'm only 13. How would I have a job legally anyway?" Um, but he was really cool. He's like, "How about if you help me out from time to time? If you want to stop by, and if you help me out like boxing, bagging comics, I'll give you a discount, or I'll give you a couple for free. Stuff like that. We'll work it that way because obviously you can't work because you're 13. You don't have working papers, stuff like that." And to me, I was like, "Oh my god!" So it was funny because I would go and help my grandmother real fast, and I would get through that really quick, even though I probably shouldn't have. I would go really fast, and I would tell my grandmother, and my mother knew too. I was like, he asked me if I could help him out, and so my mom would go take my grandmother back. She would leave me at the store, and she would go because my grandmother's house was only about like 2 or 3 blocks from the store, so it wasn't bad. She would go drop my grandmother off and hang out there for a little while, and I would help the comic book store owner Hal with the comics. I would stay there an hour, 2 hours. I loved it when I was there 2 hours because it was great, and he loved it too because people would come in and ask him for a comic, or they would say, "I saw this comic and this was on the cover. This is the character," and I knew exactly which one they were talking about. And I would find it for them, and he loved it. He's like, "Wow," he's like, "My sales increased. You know, they're going through the roof because you know this stuff." And when I was a kid, I swear I couldn't get enough of the stuff. It just I would read every encyclopedia on the characters. I knew all their first appearances. I knew, key issues. I knew what to look for. I knew how much stuff was back in the day because back then they didn't have internet or anything, so you couldn't look it up. You had to do it the hard way, and just knew it all about the time. And so he was very cool, and I worked there, and then it sucked because I wound up moving again, and you know why. If you're watching the video, you know why I had to move again. Um, when I moved to Wanto, I met my best friend, which Paul. He was really really cool, um, just an awesome guy. But I wound up moving again, uh, which wasn't bad, but it also pretty much changed my life for the better and for the worse, I guess. But stopped by in California to meet my not meet my cousin, to see my cousin when we moved, and saw my cousin's huge collection, which was still mine looks like a little anthill compared to his giant skyscraper of comics. But anyway, um, then I wound up moving to Lindenhurst, New York, which was pretty cool because I met a lot of my friends. I actually met my girlfriend at the time there, Denise. Um, and it sucked because now I was really far away from the comic store I was actually helping out at. So it kind of blew because I didn't get a chance to always go there, and my grandmother, we weren't always taking her shopping because we couldn't get there. So my uncle actually took over those duties. Um, so it sucked. I wasn't able to get to the comic book store as much as I wanted. I would get there maybe like once or twice in a month, if that. And I remember when I moved to Lyndhurst, there was actually another comic book store which was like 3 or 4 blocks away from my house, Bailey's, which was really really cool. So I started going there a lot, even though my allegiance was still to FunQuest, which is what it was called. Um, I couldn't get there. I mean, not like I drove or anything, and no matter how much I begged my parents, it was always like, I can't go there. We can't go there. We have too much stuff to do and stuff like that. Um, so it kind of sucked. And then when I turned 14, I remember going back to 14. Yeah, 14. I remember going back there one last time, and I went to go to the comic store to say hello and see how everybody was doing there because they're almost like a second family. Like everybody knew who I was and stuff like that. And they were closed. They closed down. They went out of business, and it just sucked because my heart kind of went yeesh. I was like, oh man, I love this place, and it's gone. But basically then Bailey's became my new haunt. I used to go there all the time right after school, and again, like I said, with comics, they're always your friend. Like even if, no matter how bad of a day I had in junior high, people giving me shit, I would always go to Bailey's and nothing mattered. They weren't there to judge you. I mean, they're nicest people in the world. I still go to Bailey's. Not as much as I would like, but I still go there. They were pretty much became like a second family too. I was there from, when I would get out of school, I would walk straight there. And then my mom always knew why I was late. At first, she couldn't figure it out. She's like, "Why are you always late? How are you got out at 3 o'clock. Why are you coming home at 7?" And I told her, I was like, "Well, Bailey's is right up the same block as the thing." I was like, "So I have to walk that way to get home anyway. So I always just kind of pop in, and then I lose track of time. You're looking at one comic, you talk to somebody about another, and so on and so forth." That's pretty much how it works, though. And it's just good times with comics. Good times. Like I said, they don't judge you, no matter what was going on in my life, no matter how much shit would happen or come down. Or when I met my girlfriend when I was 15, and whenever we had a fight, I'd always go back to comics and be like, oh, and sometimes it sounds stupid, but I'd be like, what would Spider-Man do in this, kind of thing, or what would, then I started getting to Batman. What would Batman do, and stuff like that. And in my head, that's what I was thinking. I was like, what would this person do? Like, um, not that my parents didn't teach me this, but comics also kind of taught me right from wrong in a roundabout sort of way too. Like, I would sit there and be like, what would somebody in that if I had the same situation, what would he do? Would you, do this or would you do that? And I would always choose the good side, because I'm a good person. Yeah. um, but anyway, that's another reason why I actually had gaps when I was dating this girl Denise. It's not that she wasn't into comics. I just don't think she understood, stuff. Not she was against it, like she was forbidding me to buy comics. But because I was dating her, all the money that I did make when I did odd jobs and I worked with my father in construction, every money I made, I was always saving it so I could hang out with her and we could go to a movie or something like that. So comics kind of took a bit of a nosedive with me. Like from 95 to 97, I wasn't collecting any comics. Um, I just kind of stopped altogether, and that's one of the reasons I have such major gaps in my collection, because I just stopped for 2.5 years, 3 years, and then of course we broke up. Not going to go into that, but and I started going back to comics, and then my best friend at the time, because we're actually not really friends that well anymore. Still friends, kind of, but not like we used to be. Um, don't pity me. What was it? Yeah, he started getting into comics like I was, so we were always having like competitions on who can get the better comic first. Like especially when Bishop came out, he's like he got it before I did. He's like, I got the first appearance of Bishop, and I'd be like, oh yeah, well I got the first appearance of Carnage. Oh, you bastard, so something. But I started getting back into comics in '97, and in '98 I had an awesome job as a landscaper, so I really made a lot of money, and then I really started going crazy buying, all these comics, which probably should have saved my money, but comic book collectors know you never save your money when you can get a shot at that stuff. Um, anyway, uh, Lindenhurst was a good place, stuff like that. Like I said, good stuff with comic book stores, and then again, it was a cool place because I met so many cool people, and I have so many friends from when I lived there, and I still talk to everybody in one way or another. And very cool place. But longest place I ever lived was Lindenhurst. I was there 8.5 years. Um, then I moved again. Obviously, you know why. I was gone. I was in Japan for a little while, and I came back. And when I came back, I actually met my fiance. Uh, That's obviously she's my girlfriend at the time, but she's gonna kill me if I show this picture. But I figured, what the hell, because it kind of states a point. But there I am and my fiance with my Superman shirt, so you can see I'm a crazy comic book person. Don't tell her I put that up. But anyway, she is really cool with stuff like that because I kind of again I stopped in 2001 collecting comics for a long time because I just didn't have the money. When I moved, I had to move in with my grandmother because my father basically just said, we can't afford anything. I want to be a gambler from now on. I'm not even going to go to work. I'm just going to gamble. And he kind of just left. So my mother and I were left to kind of fend for ourselves, which was rough because my mother didn't make that much money. I mean, we were barely able to eat, and we were actually, before we moved, when I got back from Japan, and everyone's like, oh, how the hell did you go to Japan if you're, broke? That's kind of a tough kind of thing. I actually started, I was in martial arts since I was 4, but I never went too hardcore until I became a teenager when I really got into it. So it kind of coincides with the comics. But anyway, this other girl I was dating at the time, we were really good friends, and her father was a master of ninjutsu, and I pretty much studied almost every martial art. It's kind of getting out of context with comics, but it still kind of coincides. But anyway, I studied pretty much every martial art. I mean, I wasn't great in all of them, but a lot of the ones I was good with. Ninjutsu was one of them. I was just a natural at it, and she was going to Japan to further training, and her father loved me, and usually with ninjutsu they don't train anybody unless you're family. But he made an exception, so he started training me in ninjutsu. And she was going to Japan to further her training with her father's master, grandmaster, if you want to get into the technical thing. And I went with her. Her father, pretty much hooked me up and said, take care of my daughter, and I trust you, and all that stuff. And I went there for it's about a year and a half, and then again we were kind of together, we kind of weren't, because she kind of wanted to stay there, and I didn't want to stay there. Not that it wasn't beautiful, but I missed everybody home, so she stayed and I came back. And like I said, when it was funny when I came back, I met my fiance, which was, it's funny how things work out. But anyway, that's pretty much how I got the trip to Japan. But when I came back, again, I was living in my mother's car. We were living in the car. We had nowhere to go, and then my grandmother finally was cool, and she took us in. And again, with comics, that was pretty much the only thing I kept. So all the boxes of comics that I had, my uncle took in shifts. Like, he would come to the house when we were evicted, and he took the comics and he kept them in his room and kept them nice and safe. So they were always, there. Again, when I was feeling crappy because I didn't have a place to live, I was in the car, I would run to his room before he came home, and I would grab a couple comics, and I would read them in the car until it got dark, and then, that was that. But then again, then I was living in Hicksville, or my grandmother's house, for, another second longest area. That was, 2001 to, so was that almost 8 years. I was there a long time. But again, with my fiance, it's not that she forbid me to buy comics. It was just that I was always trying to save money to take her out, stuff like that. Not that she ever asked. She was always like, I don't mind sitting at home and, and just doing nothing, just hanging out, watching TV. And once I realized that, I was able to put a lot of money towards comics again. And I've been collecting them steadily ever since, until recently, like I said, when I lost my job. My fiance is still really cool. She knows how passionate I am, and she said that's one of the reasons that she loves me so much, is because I talk about it with such like passion, where it's just like, she's like, oh my god, you really love this stuff and you really are into it. And as this video is long as hell, now you know why I really love the stuff, and the reason behind comics, and the reason I get so excited when I walk to a comic book store, because it kind of brings me back to when I was a kid, and I'm just like, oh man, the smell of the bookstore is just, can't really describe it, but any comic book fan watching this knows what I'm talking about. You just know when you walk in a comic book store, all the crap, all the bad things that happen to you just left outside. And when you get into that comic book store, you're in another world. There's no one there to piss you off. There's no one there to judge you in any way, like, oh, you're too fat, you're too skinny, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're this. Nobody, because everybody in the comic book community, I would say, they're awesome people. They're there for their own comics. They're not there to give you shit, So and usually you make a lot of good friends that way. People are there because they share, like, a lot of my friends are like, Spider-Man's awesome. Oh yeah, well look what I got. I got this one. Oh my god, you lucky bastard. Or me the same way. Like when my friend, he got Amazing Spider-Man #4, the first Sandman. I almost shit myself. I was like, oh my god, dude, you got the first Sandman. And he, we all did a little dance, and we looked at it with gloves, and we were kind of like going, oh my god, that's awesome. Oh my god, that's awesome. But that's the real story about me, why I love comics, why I'm into them, and you gotta see a picture of my fiance. An old picture. She looks just as good now. I don't. I got worse. But anyway, that's pretty much it, and I hope you like this episode as much as I love telling it. Man, it kind of feels crazy to tell people that, but like I said, my friends want to know, so if anything, my friends at least will get a kick out of this, so they have an idea. But again, sorry for all my rambling, but it wasn't bad, a little trip down memory lane. But anyway, always, like I said, if you like what you see, hit like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I love comments, and I love watching everybody's videos. So don't think I don't watch your videos. I do watch them, so it just takes me some time to watch them all. But anyway, thanks again, and I'll see you on the next episode. Later.